In Norse mythology, there's Yggdrasil, which is like the computer program that creates reality. So Wotan is like a hacker dev, and he tries to use words to reprogram his destiny, reprogram his reality. You're seeing the rise in belief, and what is it happening alongside in perfect lockstep? The rise in nationalism, the rise in self-interest, the rise in essentially tribalism. And that's why you see online culture like this.
These are Zoomers in their 20s talking about being nationalists because boundaries are gone now. People want boundaries again.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Break the Rules Show. I'm your host, Lev Polyakov, and we are here today with Gnostic Informant, the uncoverer of all of the ancient wisdom. And we have to my right, Uberboyo, the Irishman, Nietzschean sage himself.
Good Lord, all right.
Good Lord is right. And today we are here talking about the end of the world. Whether or not we're heading into what is in the mind, I think, of a lot of young Zoomers right now. They are very interested in Kanye West's new music video, Heil Hitler. And when it comes to what they're seeing from Mr. West, they are seeing this embrace of chaos through the symbology of the wolf, who was very reminiscent of Fenrir, the wolf of Norse mythology, who was supposed to swallow up the sun and unleash chaos over order. And I think the reason for it is because a lot of these Zoomers, the way that they grew up, they were surrounded by technology, surveillance, as well as a lot of degeneracy. So in a way, I could see them looking at somebody like Adolf Hitler as a kind of older brother, 4chan, father figure, somebody that will guide them out of this degenerate yet very overly watchful Apollonian eye. But the thing about Odin, which somebody like Carl Jung, as you know, attributed to Hitler and the German people during that time, Wotan is another name for Odin, meaning Lord of the Frenzy. And this is an example of somebody who embraces the chaos, even though Odin himself in the Norse sagas was supposed to be somebody who withheld Ragnarok, who withheld the apocalypse for as long as he possibly could. And ultimately, he was not successful. So we're going to be talking about the various ends of the world and whether or not we are currently living at a time which, I don't know, you never know with the internet and AI and all that, whether we're being led into that. But I do want to start with a question to Steph over here. So when it comes to this quality of Odin, wanting to withhold the end of the world as much as possible, even though people like Carl Jung would look at Hitler and Nazi Germany as being these forces that want to preserve order, would you not say that somebody more like, I don't know, a Sam Harris or a Douglas Murray, like the more classic liberals, would be the kind of people that are more like an Odin figure who, even if they're not successful, they're trying as much as they can to stop the end of the world from happening, to stop this chaos being generated by these sex-deprived Zoomers from happening? What say you?
That's the complete wrong way to look at it. Odin is the god of frenzy.
Yes.
Odin is the god of the storm. Odin is the god of the berserkers. The idea about what Jung was pointing out in Wotan, a lot of people misunderstand this, is he was saying that Wotan's will is he wants to try harvest warriors to Valhalla so he can fight Fenrir at the end of time. So his action in the world is that he picks fights. Wotan is like he's like Dana White, and he's sitting up there in heaven, wherever you want to say, at the top of Yggdrasil, and he's seeing the Russians and the Germans, and he wants to get them to fight so that he can go down and find the super warriors in the fight and claim their souls and bring them into the afterlife. So his whole thing is he creates frenzy. He doesn't give a shit about like the
morality.
winning. Yeah, he's just like, I need to see who's the best fighter here. So I need to create a fight. So he's a frenzy creator. So the thinking is that like he goes in, generates berserker gang, or like the berserker energy inside of them. And they lose their minds and they chud out, and then they go and kill each other. And then if they fight well, Wotan sends the Valkyries, and the Valkyries come down, they're gorgeous, and like, come on, we're going to Valhalla, and they get to drink till the end of time, and then they fight the wolf. this type of thing. So Douglas Murray, these shills,
Oh, come on. Douglas is great. I love Douglas Murray.
No, Douglas is an idiot. Like, Douglas is a...
Why is he an idiot? He's saying everything correctly. Even if he may be wrong about whether or not it'll work out in the end, I see nothing Douglas Murray has said that's incorrect. But to what you were talking about earlier, Steph, what I would add is that all of this shutting out was not just for its own sake. It was the sake of delaying Ragnarok from happening. And would that not be a more prudent position versus letting the wolf devour everything?
No, you need to fight the wolf and try to... So the Norse mythology is based on the premise that you have a destiny. The whole concept was you have a weird. We're actually where we get the word from. So the way we get the word from is because in Norse mythology, there's Yggdrasil, which is like the computer program that creates reality. And the computer program has at the bottom of it, at its roots, a load of Norns. These are a bunch of chicks that spend all their day weaving. And they weave your story. They weave Lev, they weave Neal, they weave all these gentlemen. And this goes up in the Yggdrasil and goes up as information, and then it like blossoms as the flowers of destiny. And Wotan existed within this, and he was wondering, because he found out his destiny is like, you're going to get eaten by a wolf. He's like, that fucking sucks. So can I change this? So he figures out how to get his magic horse, who goes to the bottom of Yggdrasil to find the coding mechanism. How do the Norns code the Yggdrasil? And that's obviously the runes, where he sacrifices his eye. So Wotan is like a hacker dev. He's like a reprogrammer. And he goes in and he discovers the runes, which are essentially words. And he tries to use words, will, which is all related in many ways, to reprogram his destiny, reprogram his reality, this type of thing. So what he's doing is he's not trying to establish order. He's not trying to control the situation. He understands that destiny is coming where chaos is going to break down. And he's literally trying to reprogram. He's actually trying to do the will to power. He's trying to reprogram the situation to like escape inevitable destiny and all these type of things. So he's not like the idea.
It's very Promethean if you think about it.
Exactly. It's a complete wrong perspective to think. And people like we're going to argue about this so much. People like Douglas and all them, they're trying to maybe control frenzy. Woden would be like more frenzy. Woden would be like, yay, fucking 3 more songs, please. We want chaos. Yeah. I want the fight to happen. Woden would be like that. He wants to stimulate.
Just like Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita.
Yeah. So
more
like,
war,
more
more
like
battle.
Destroyer. And Jung's warning, Jung was saying that it's like the Germans want this fighting energy and they might conquer. Like they could do it. They could take over Russia and become like America 2.0 or something like this. But Jung's warning is just basically like, you have to understand that when you're possessed by Woden, you're not in charge. He's in charge. And his goals are just chaos. He's not... Woden is not trying to create a Russian, Germanic, Prussian empire. Woden is trying to find super warriors. He's trying to find Ubermensch out of the fighters. He's trying to see who's the best fighter. And so when Woden is stimulating this stuff, you might maybe think he's on your side, but it's like, does he give a shit about any of that stuff? He's trying to just stir up this type of frenzy. So he is in some sense like a god of chaos, a destroyer. And this is, Jung was saying like, okay, yeah, just be careful because you will shut out and you'll think it's going to work out, but things will come back. And like at the beginning of the war, everybody was like, Germany are going to crush Russia. And then by 1942, all of a sudden everybody was like, fuck, we've been tricked. This is not good. This is like, it started to turn really, really sharply. So like, I wonder, was Jung sitting there and being like, this is what I expected to happen, this type of thing. So that's the correct conception of Jung's take on all of this stuff.
Well, I was having a conversation with the great Jason Resiger Johnny about Odin and this inevitability of chaos taking over, where he was talking about how some of these esoteric Hitlerists like Satri Devi, they were talking about how, Hitler gave a good try in order to preserve this order, but this just goes to show you how degenerate and chaotic our times are today, that even these, wonderful Nazis were not able to stand up to these globalistic forces.
That would be the Kali Yuga theory in paganism, where we have, so in Abrahamism, and Christianity, and actually in liberalism, there is a motivated, positive outlook towards the world. There's a affirmative outlook where you believe that we're linearly going towards the kingdom of heaven and we're progressing towards something good.
Yeah.
And so we're coming from a position of being fallen and we're rising up towards the glory days. Yeah. They're coming. Paganism.
Golden age.
The golden age, is inevitable. Like it's more specifically, the kingdom of God is coming if we act moral and in line with it. Yeah. Paganism, the Kali Yuga, like Evola and stuff like this, has a complete, massively pessimistic opposite perspective where the golden age happened.
Yep. Saturn ruled the world.
I think ancient Greeks believed this.
Greeks said Kronos ruled the world, gave us the golden age. Then there's like a Silver Age after that, and then a Bronze Age, and then there's the era we're in now. But you're right, it's descending from the Golden Age, which is when Saturn ruled.
Yeah, Neal will probably actually know this much better than me, but like the general just sort of motivational thesis is that yes, there's this down going happening. There's this it's the forces of entropy, and you would look at like Hitler as a hero who is fighting to like overcome those forces of entropy and establish the old guard, and then like Devi and all them would be saying like, oh, he was out of time. He came in a time there was too much. The Kali Yuga was too strong, and he was like rising up, and he almost did it, and he failed. And that's the sort of idea that it's like a down going, a degenerating, a falling, and so he went to Antarctica and he lives down there in a spaceship, and he's going to come back. That was the sort of idea. That's massively pessimistic. That's like actually quite a common, not like consciously, but I think that's very common in the right wing. I notice a lot of people have this idea that the golden age was in the 1800s or 1700s or in the past or trad Christianity or before the Enlightenment, and we've fallen since then, and we're in a degrading, downgoing age. But I would actually love to hear Neal's. If he has anything to fill out in that, because I know he'd know this inside out, but I'll leave it up to you to direct.
No, I agree that was the cosmology and the Homeric, Hesiodic, during the pre-Socratic era, during the classical period. That was the common cosmology, is that you have these ages, and then you see this reflected in Hinduism because they're ultimately coming from a common ancestral source, which would be the Indo-Europeans. And you could see in both sides of the world this idea that there is a golden age that was already here. Everything was perfect. There was no need to toil. You can just walk outside and you can find all the fruits that you want on every tree right by your house.
There was no men. There was no women. Is that the Prometheus story, Lev? I'm not quite sure.
Is that what? That might have been one of the versions of it.
That's hardcore.
Yeah. That's hardcore.
That's an incel.
Yeah, no, I think I've heard something. I think I heard something about like something like that. And then women. You're right.
Because Pandora's box. Yeah,
women were created from man, and that's where everything starts getting corrupted. Pandora's box is one of these Hesiodic stories. Pandora, and she's warned by Prometheus, who's like the serpent in the garden, which is odd. He plays the role. He's not a serpent in the story, but his role in the story is warning her that she shouldn't do this, or you're going to be told to do something, don't do it. And he warns her, and then his warning falls to the wayside. She's married to his brother, Epimetheus, who can't do anything right. He's like, his name's Epimetheus because he's always looking backwards instead of looking forwards. So he fails to take heed to his brother's warning. She opens up Pandora's box. All reality changes from there. And then blame everything on this like event. The Orphics had their own version of this too. And the Hellenistic period, the Orphics, who were basically worshippers of Dionysus and Apollo. The high priest of the Orphic religion was the high priest of Dionysus and Apollo. But they had this myth where Dionysus was born as Zagreus, his first incarnation, and he was chosen to sort of restore the golden age because you had this succession from Uranos, who was the first king, then Saturn, then Zeus, and then Zagreus was supposed to be the next line who's supposed to be the next king of the cosmos. And Zeus was going to hand it off to him. Hera finds this out, and she sends the Titans to go and find the baby Zagreus, and they lure him with toys because he's a little baby. They're like, look how cool these toys are. And as soon as he's lured by the toys, they rip him apart and eat him as a sacrifice. And they eat his flesh and everything. Zeus finds out, and he completely loses his shit. He causes a deluge, which is a cosmic flood, wipes out the entire cosmos, and takes the Titans who just consumed the body of Zagreus. And what he does is he takes the Titan flesh, creates the cosmos anew, but all the living creatures in the cosmos, which is you and I, are composed of soul and body. And our bodies are the flesh of the Titans, and our soul is Dionysus. Wow. So that was and that's their version of the fall. So then you start seeing so that's why the reason why I brought that up is because, as you pointed out, the farther back you go, it's a descending. It's the golden age was in the beginning, and then things are going to get better, or things are going to get worse. And then all of a sudden in the Hellenistic period, the Orphics and other myths are starting to switch it up and go, actually, there's going to be some sort of reckoning at the end for everything. Like everything was good, then everything fell, and now things are going to get better again. This whole like hope for the future type of mentality that Christianity ends up adopting. You start seeing that towards like the end of the 3rd century BC and 2nd century.
So that's because in the Bible, in the Torah, I should say, there is like everyone lives for like 600 years, don't they?
Yeah.
They're all like Brian Johnson.
Adam lives for like 1,000 years.
Yeah.
Abraham lives for 900 years.
Just knocking back so.
No, but
all
that's
of them.
still nothing
Yeah.
compared to the Egyptian king list where you have Thoth living for like 7,000
Yeah.
years.
7,000.
Yeah.
Sumerians had this Sumerian kings list.
We need his
all their
supplements back,
kings
man.
are living for 1,000 years and 10,000 years. Same with Egyptian. Yeah, it's just like some sort of,
So like that would be the similar thing, is that everybody lives for ages
and things got worse.
and things got worse, and then the kingdom of heaven is when we return to that. So it's like
Yeah.
the fall got worse. Interesting. So it's
So
there.
at some point, people started to like fantasize of some day where there's going to be a reckoning and things are going to straighten out.
Yeah.
And this is where you get like this whole idea of eschatology. Zoroastrians have their end of the world situation. The Jews obviously do too, the Messianic age, and then the Christians obviously adopt this.
And is that what makes their ones positive? Because they're like, it's going to work out. Good is going to triumph over evil, kingdom of God. And then like Wotan is like, because apparently in Wotan's myth, even though he figures out the runes and he actually is able to because he becomes the master of destiny, and
Yeah.
he can change destiny, he can't beat the wolf though. Like, that's the fundamental pessimism of Norse mythology, is that the wolf does kill Wotan. There's no way he beats that. And the universe collapses and dies.
But Wotan does ensure in a way that the light is reborn because there is continuation afterwards.
Yes, which is also quite interesting if you think about this, like related to physics, because if you think of the idea of like the Big Bang, we have this idea that there's an explosion at the beginning of time that blossoms into the universe. It's like the Kali Yuga in a way.
Yeah.
And then the heat death is inevitable and we're all going to get fucked.
Yeah.
And I think there's one theory that they call it the big spring or big snap, where it's like Big Bang and then it implodes and then Big Bangs again.
Yeah.
And this the big what? Sorry?
Big crunch. Yeah.
Big crunch. And that's sort of like what Norse myth is like. It's like Woden fails and then Venir eats everything, but then it like bounces back.
Like cycles back and forth. But that's interesting. You just reminded me, Heraclitus, and the little bit of fragments of him, he has his own eschatology views where there's two deaths of the cosmos, one by water, one by fire, which is interesting because he's writing about this in like 500 BC, around there, somewhere in the 6th century BC. And in the Old Testament and in Christianity, in Judaism and in Christianity, you have the world ending by a flood, and then the world ending by fire at the end. So they're almost like, it almost makes you think: are they as Heraclitean? Is this like the norm? Is it not just Heraclitus that thought this?
No, but you missed one, which is the Zoroastrian version, which is Frashgard, which means a refreshing of the world. And that one is not fire, it's molten metal.
Right.
And what is described is that the people who have purified themselves spiritually, they are able to go through the molten metal like going through warm milk.
Right.
But the specific kind of spiritualization, it isn't, bowing your head and offering piety to God. What this spiritual ascendance means is that you get in touch with your individuated self, which is the Favrashi. Some people would refer to them as like guardian angels, but it's like the complete self of you that is awaiting you towards the future, which has been depicted with the symbol of the man with the spread out wings, sitting in the ring, kind of like the Sonic the Hedgehog logo, by the way.
Wow.
And I did a whole video, by the way, about the esoteric secrets of Sonic the Hedgehog. But anyway, when it comes to this guardian angel of yours that you're trying to seek out, the spreading of the wings is very similar to the Hermetic Kedusha symbol, which in my own meditation experiences has also been associated with the rising up of the Kundalini. So it's a process that people are able to go through as they start getting deeper in touch with what exactly is going on in the world. And so I think the idea is that you start to realize that this entire world that we're in is also a dream. And by dream, I don't mean that we can't get hurt, but that everything is just like this tightly woven mass of all of these...
Like the fates that you were describing, they're getting woven together.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Which means that the dream worlds that we inhabit when we go to sleep, they're also real. Like Rudolf Steiner talked about, whatever we think of, we give life to that. Like we start creating like our own thought forms that if we concentrate on them enough, they start having like a more deeper life. But anyway, the idea here is that this world is just as constructed as a dream world as our dreams are, but much more tightly so. And the idea is whether or not we can ascend as creators, whether we can learn from this very, very real world. And maybe after Frashgard, some of us will be able to create our own worlds. I don't know. You could have your own Uberboyo's gym for men.
Men?
That's very Gnostic. That's very Gnostic
men
too.
only.
Yeah, for men. No
Interesting.
girls
All right.
allowed.
No girls.
But that's a very Gnostic worldview. Is the
Yeah.
idea that you can attain godhood and then sort of like become your own ion in somewhere
Exactly.
in Pleroma.
Yeah.
Is it similar to like Jung's Age of Aquarius idea that the molten metal is like technology, and going into that you're going to have to individuate? Actually, there's a interesting segue into the talk about the Zoomers you're having earlier.
Yes.
because I know you're worried about they're all going to start listening to Yay and go Woden mode or something like this.
Yeah.
But well, do you want me to go into that, or is there any way you want to take?
And they're
it?
all mixed race too.
Before we get into that, I want to thank the audience here, the BTR audience, which is made up of the patrons, patreon.com/breaktherules. If you guys are enjoying the show and want to help the show grow, go there, become a patron today. And if you guys become a $20 patron like these wonderful gentlemen over here, you are going to get to go to the New York City studio and join us in these wonderful conversations. Yeah, and then we're going to go for an after party afterwards. I also have a rooftop. Right now it's
You have a rooftop.
I have a rooftop, yeah. And lastly, I just want to say, BiltonguSA.com. The reason why we don't have any biltong over here is because I ate it all. Sorry.
Yeah, that's
Nothing I can do about that.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
just edit Biltong over this.
A Coke and a biltong is mwah.
Yes. And if you guys go there and type in code word BTR at checkout, you are going to get absolutely delicious, nutritious biltong. It's great for after working out at Steph's dream gym for men.
Wait.
So I propose a toast to the great patrons of BTR and to biltong.
Cheers.
Cheers. L'chaim.
What's L'chaim mean?
Let's talk about what's currently going on, Steph, with these poor Zoomers living under surveillance and wanting to wild out.
Yeah, a lot of people mythologize this. A lot of people look at the phenomenon with the Zoomers, and they obviously add a lot of their emotions into it because various tribal reasons that they wanted to go a certain way. Douglas Murray, the reason why Douglas Murray is an idiot and many of those people who are saying stuff like woke right are stupid is because they're missing the zeitgeist. They're misunderstanding the situation. Jordan Peterson is ruining his reputation because he's misunderstanding the situation, because they're not able to look objectively and take their emotions out of it and see what's happening. So, for example, the rise of atheism, Jordan Peterson, Douglas Murray a little bit maybe like this as well, but Jordan Peterson specifically did a really good job of murking the new atheists like Sam Harris. Yeah. Like he came in with the suit and the tie, and he sat down and he said, "You're wrong."
Did good.
And the zeitgeist really was with him at that moment. Like the energy in the room when he was in 2017, people loved Jordan Peterson for good reason, because he was re-mythologizing the world. And the new atheists actually had their own zeitgeist. I don't really remember it, but like some people who are older than me often said that the new atheists had this panache where they really, really had like a lot of really powerful energy. Yeah. And then Jordan Peterson cleaned that up.
And it was all destructive and none creative. It was just the demolition crew.
It was
they weren't building anything. They were demolishing things.
But like even like if you look back at it, like the likes of Hitchens and all that, he's a very like honest guy. Like he's very, very straightforward.
I'll still watch clips of him all the time just to hear it.
He's like wicked smart. Like he was not, and I knew he had like he was really extreme on free speech. I think David Irving, he was up there being like, no, he should be allowed to talk and stuff like that. And he's like, I completely disagree with everything he says, but I want to hear him. And it's like, that's interesting.
That's the classic liberal approach.
Yeah. Because it's not like woke, if you will.
No, but don't you think that somebody like Douglas Murray would also be the same way when it comes to somebody like David Irving?
To an extent.
Because on Joe Rogan's podcast, that was the main point that he was talking about. He was saying how he has no problem with people like that talking, but it's also important for the sake of the audience, if you have somebody like Rogan, who's such a big podcaster, just to have other people there who are able to push back. And you know what? If Irving has good points, he can push back on that.
And on top
that's
of
all
that,
good.
David Irving's very scholarly, and he's very concise, and his arguments are based on evidence and data. He's doing what academics are supposed to be doing. The only thing is they just don't like what he's saying. He's saying some crazy shit. But my point is, like, there's nothing you could say that he's doing as far as behavior goes that is worthwhile in shutting him down. He's an academic if you think about it.
Well, let me continue the point because I think I'm going to take it in a slightly different direction. That's just an example of new atheism doing well. It was a way different movement than a lot of people remember it. It had the zeitgeist. And then that obviously transitioned into woke, I guess you could say. Jordan Peterson comes up and does this. So this was representative that there was something going on. Now, why was that happening? Because again, people don't tend to study these things. Atheism has been gradually escalating in the amount of the size of the population that it has been taking every single generation for nearly 150 years. Each successive generation is more atheist. They believe in God less. So it's like a cascade. It has been a continuous cascade. And the boomers, more religious than the Gen Xers. Is that what it is? The millennials, so on, so on. Now, this atheist swelling only peaked in our generation.
Yeah.
In the year 2000, England was still majority Christian in declared belief. Now, people attending church, which is probably the truer facts, that was abysmally low even at that point. But we'll say declaring out of their mouth, do you believe in God? Do you believe in Christianity? They would say yes. And that was about 42%. And the atheists were still only about a third. They were floating around 30%. In the year 2015, 2017, around about that period, when Jordan Peterson was rising up, atheism was actually finally becoming the majority declared position in England. And you would have imagined that atheism with God is dead and everything had been there for generations at that point. You say, it's been there since the 60s. Oh, we've been woke since the 60s. No, that only reached its cascade point in the 2010s. That was it. So we lived through that.
Yeah.
And that was the triumph of atheism when atheism flipped.
And the Zoomers are the product of that.
Exactly. Now, this is where things get so fascinating because this is what I mean. A lot of people seem to be missing this context. That cascade has been happening across the board, heavier and heavier, until the Zoomers. The Zoomers are the first generation ever in like about 200 years to break that trend and become more religious, more faithful than their parents. That's a big deal. That's a big deal. So there's a trend reversal taking place right now. Now, when did this trend reversal happen specifically? Between the years 2021 and 2023. So during COVID, I remember Tate converted. Remember Tate was like, I believe in God now. God's real.
Yeah.
You're gay if you don't believe in God. You know, like he does this. And he's very representative of the zeitgeist. You think about him, actually, he's so fascinating because just like 5 years before that, he was like, OnlyFans, he was putting videos up on YouTube being like, I'm an atheist, it's stupid to believe in God. Put the woman on OnlyFans. And he was representative of that like zeitgeist. It was in him. And he was doing the webcam thing, you know, early, like long before anybody else was. Then during 2020, he was like the authority on webcam. It became a mainstream thing. OnlyFans happens. And then he also pivots in towards the God thing.
Interesting.
And 2021, 2023, when he became basically world famous, is the pivot point. That's when it happens. And you see...
That's on the time where I started getting serious about religion again, too.
So there's a big zeitgeist
Something
happening.
was happening.
Big zeitgeist happening. And what was happening at that point is... it's very specific. It was a rise in declared belief, rise in a belief in a higher power, but not an increase in belief in religious institutions.
Right.
The belief in religious institutions actually continues to go down. So people are saying, I believe in God. I'm not an atheist. So they're not saying like the world is a machine. I fuck that shit. I don't believe in that anymore. They're saying, yes, I believe in God, but they're not returning to the church as people think, or returning to the mosque or whatever it is. That seems to not be happening. Instead, it's TikTok religiosity.
Yeah,
so
New Ageism.
They're going to you, they're going to people like you, and they're listening, and you're like a priest to them. They're finding influencers. And they're having a techno-religiosity that's happening.
I don't know how much it's the spiritual, like, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual New Ageism, versus a lot of Zoomers who are so pissed off at the boomers and Gen Y and the millennials that in a way they're embracing not just religion, but like the hardest kind of soldier of God and, warrior for Allah type ideal. And how much do you think that that's because a lot of them are bored?
No, you see, this is it. Like people come into this and they try project mythologically. I say that's the wrong way to say it, but that we project our own perspectives on this without saying how do we find objective realities here?
Okay.
Like we're talking about like stats that are very clearly showing something, and we try to find reasons for this. But like it's like we can all have our theories on this. But what would be a scientific process for studying this? So I'll give you one. Now you might not agree with this, but think about this. Inside of your mind, you have a section of your brain. This is hard neuroscience called your posterior medial frontal cortex. Forgive me, gents. This is going to be a lot of fucking terms, but posterior medial frontal cortex. Now, the job of this part of your brain is it's called the problem solving or problem categorizing part of your brain. So what it does is it sits here, right here, and it analyzes reality. And if it detects errors or problems or anomalies or mistakes, it hyper-focuses them and asks other parts of the brain to dedicate resources. So that's very confusing. Think of it like Sauron. It's this light bulb that can't do anything. It's just this giant eye. And when it sees a problem, when Neal pulls out a pistol, it will be like, that's fucking not good. And it will tell my visual cortex or my arms to jump and do something. So it's Sauron telling the orcs to dedicate resources. This is this part of your brain. Now, in 2015, a group of researchers got magnets and zapped this part of the brain. Now, what do magnets do? When you take magnets to your brain, you can turn parts of your brain off like you turn muscles off.
Bizarre.
So you can take, for example, magnets to your Broca's area, which is just behind your left ear, and you will not be able to speak for 3 hours because they'll shut down the electromagnetic signals, and you'll be like, blah, 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 blah.
Oh my God, so weird.
And then it will come back online. It's like a muscle going off. So you're able to destimulate parts of the mind. So they do it to this posterior medial frontal cortex Sauron. And what's the results they see?
Atheism.
The belief in God lowers, and the openness to foreigners rises.
Yeah, you become like one of those typical left-wing atheists.
You become woke. So what happens is you see the values that we hold as like we put into legality, into laws, such as like racism or belief in God is like hard science. You can see that you can shift those values by stimulating or de-stimulating parts of the brain. Now, this is a huge deal because what you see there is something that we treat as objective, as putting into legality. Morality, as we understand it, as the woke morality, is actually like a part of the mind. So you have to ask yourself then, it's like, well, what the hell does that mean? It means that tribalism and belief in God is actually connected inside of the brain. And then even worse, it's like, what is this part of your brain supposed to do? This is the part of your brain that generates your capacity to deal with problems. When you suppress this part of your brain, you become more atheist, and you also become more open to foreigners, you're anti-racist, if you will. But you also lose the ability to evolve when you do this. Because if Sauron can't notice problems, you can't dedicate resources towards learning and solving them. So it creates this sort of last man, this Nietzschean last man, who's atheist, open-minded, if you will, or like anti-racist, if you will, or non-tribal, and he's like basically cannot adapt. He's stuck as he is. That's his final form. But interestingly, when you turn this part of your mind on, it also generates tribalism, racism, belief in God, but also cognitive dissonance. This is the part of your brain that generates the capacity for you to lie for the sake of the tribe. So this is also like the ignorance-forming part of your brain. So when leftists say right-wingers are like closed-minded, they're actually correct. That is like,
I hate to say this, but it sounds like you're almost explaining a fundamentalist Christian. Like,
an ideologue.
Yeah, like because like the Christians were called atheists by pagans in late antiquity. They thought they don't believe in the gods; they're atheists. So they didn't care about Jesus and Yahweh. They're like, that's nothing. The fact that you don't believe in our ancestral customs, you're an atheist. Period. They don't care what it is. But what's interesting about the Christians, and you know this, 'cause you've done videos on this, is they were open borders. They're
Gnostic.
Open to having women do certain things around the church. And they've exactly how you're describing it. I don't believe in Zeus. I believe in this scripture because the prophecy came true. And they're very rational because they don't believe in a myth because it says so. They wanted, this text says that this prophecy says this, and this text says this prophecy was fulfilled. I'm sold. They want it to be rationally all figured out for them, which sounds like this sort of mentality. Redditors. It makes you wonder if something like in 2015 happened in 300s AD.
Yeah, like that's a really, really good question because it's like, is there a way to bring objective psychology and see this in the past and all this?
I don't think that we're that in a disagreement though, because when we're talking about something like wanting to be the soldier of God or the soldier of Allah, that would be the natural next step. Because if they're looking at a lot of these Reddit fedora tippers as being the reason why the West is in that state, surely the next step would be, you know what, guys, we can't really risk just chilling out and just surfing 4chan all day. At a certain point, we are going to have to take the streets. We are going to have some kind of an inspirational leader who is going to be coming into power, and we're going to elect him into power, and we're going to make sure that he has all the power in order to fulfill the Dharma.
Is that yay? Is that Kanye West?
I think that they, well, I mean, look at it
No,
this way.
you're correct. You're
Look at
correct.
it this way. Kanye West, no, here's the thing with Kanye West. Kanye West, to them, is like the bard who is going to be trumpeting in this Hitler 2.0 that's going to be coming around the bend.
Yeah.
So they do see him as being this chaotic force, which makes them long for the kind of order that is going to use this chaos, much like Odin had his men dressed up in these in these outfits of like the wolf skins and all of that, because even though they were fighting a wolf, they had to be wolf-like in order to do it. Yes. But here's the difficult thing. What is, going back to my original question, what is more heroic? Somebody who sees what's going on and understands that, yes, you're going to have to use a certain amount of violence, a certain amount of government coercion, but you have to absolutely make sure you do not take it too far, versus somebody who is willing to sell their neighbors down the drain and do whatever it is that they think must be done right now in order to fulfill this correction of the world without thinking at all about maybe there's some way, like somebody like a Sam Harris or a Douglas Murray would think maybe there's some way that we can do all these things, even when it comes to, deportation. Like Douglas Murray is not against deportation of a lot of these Muslims. So maybe there is a way we can do that while at the same time making sure that we don't create like a dictatorship. Is that not a better way of going about it versus just going full chud mode? Because going full chud mode, again, to me, it seems too unthinking. It seems too quick.
I understand where you're coming from, but you're moralizing about the situation instead of observing the situation. Like what I'm trying to describe to you is that these are phenomenon that are happening in the like collective unconscious of our culture right now, and we have lived through them. And these trends are like enormous, and like we've seen them. And like as we said in 2021, 2022, I actually think a lot of us felt this stuff was boiling up. So maybe the way to understand the yay phenomenon is what I'm pointing out is that there's been a gradual turning off of this Sauron posterior medial frontal cortex, and it's been escalating for literally, it seems like 150 years. People have become more woke, if you so will. And that peaked in our lifetime in the 2010s. And the trend pivot point has happened. And you're seeing this part of the brain switch on, which is coming with people noticing problems. People maybe becoming a bit fear-mongered. People becoming more cognitively dissonant. I absolutely agree that could be possible, which is, I think, what you're actually worried about. But it is also tied to a fundamental problem where this is a part of our brain that evolution has put inside of us that is there for a reason, that it allows nature to function properly. It's part of like the human mind. And so what's happening with the Zoomers is that this is turning on, this is switching on. You're seeing the rise in belief, and what is it happening alongside in perfect lockstep? The rise in nationalism, the rise in self-interest, the rise in essentially tribalism. And that's why you see online culture like this. Ye is not leading anything. Ye is an expression of that. That's all it is. And he's like as Neal correctly said, he's like a Dionysian guy that's just channeling the vibes. He's channeling the zeitgeist.
Exactly.
But the thing to understand is that, again, there's another study where Zoomers between the ages of 23 and 29 are the men are fairly right wing and the women are very, very left wing.
Wow.
Zoomers under the age of 22, between the ages of 22 and 17, the men are just like off the charts right wing, and even the women are right wing. Now, what is right wing?
Yeah.
Right wing is the morality that I'm describing here in its pure sense, which is that type of like religiosity, self-interest, that type of thing. But that's what's coming, and to say that this is what I mean.
I'm glad you brought up the whole atheism and Zoomer thing, because I actually think the future needs a religious renaissance. And I think I'm wondering, did Christianity run its course? I'm not saying Christianity is going anywhere. I'm not saying it should go anywhere. I think it's got its place in the world. It earned its place in the world. As much as I can't, as much as I oppose it. But I do think for these people who are looking at Hitchens, and Hitchens is making all these slam dunk points against, the Christianity and the church and all this stuff. Well, that's great. You identified a problem. But what's the solution to that problem? Well, tribalism, as you said. But a lot of these ancient religions that go back to the Norse or Greek or Roman or whatever it is, they are tribal. They are based on ancestral customs. They're based on land, blood and land. They're not expansionist. They're not evangelical. They're not trying to spread its wings across the world and bring in the Africans and bring in the Indians. They're trying to stay in one spot and keep ancestral customs in one spot, which causes a problem for how do you have a religious renaissance other than bringing Christianity back that's going to account for what people are really trying to get is some sort of ancient ancestral religion that, like someone like Survive the Jive, bringing back paganism of the Norse, or the Greek. I was just in Athens in Greece, and they're bringing back Greek customs. They're bringing back Eleusinian rites. They're bringing back Cabarian rites. They're bringing back Samothracian rites. All over Greece, this is happening. But people in America, we're not Native Americans. Some of us, like myself, I'm part Polish, part German, part Italian. What do I do? So I think the model going forward is to sort of copy what the Romans did, is you adopt Hellenistic tenets, but we have to somehow make our own heroes, our own ancestral forefathers, which in the case of it being an American, it'd be like George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and those guys. But like the point I'm trying to make is genetics and land matters in this. So the Christianity was good for spreading across and adopting new cultures into the fold. It did that very well, but I think that's played its course. I don't know what you think. Do you think that?
I think the points you're bringing up are excellent, and I think the correct way to look at the way I look at it is I look at these trends and try to understand what they're saying. And what I'm seeing is I actually don't think tribalism is going to be able to come back with force because of the fact that we live in such a globalized world. Mm-hmm. So I think there's a caveat to that I'll talk about later. But the trends are not saying like church tribes are growing in. They're not. I really doubt like small nationalist cliques will grow again in that type of way because they need actually kind of isolation in order to purify. You know. So it looks like we're going through is like a Protestant revolution where we had a religion like Catholicism, Christianity that was very formalized, and the Protestant revolution comes along with books and it sort of like just creates chaos and it liberates the psychology and the conscience of the people participating in it. And it actually has this like very stimulating evolutionary moment where it's forcing everyone to think about the religion and they create all these like crazy cults. But that's actually part of this process of like human mental evolution where we're actually becoming more free thinking. Where a lot of people say like because of Protestantism we got libtardism, we got the Enlightenment. But that's actually like true, and people will say, oh, the Enlightenment is so bad. It's like it's not bad. Like the whole fact that you can go online and debate and all this is because of this. Like it's like you if I took away your Enlightenment ability to think freely with your conscience, you would freak. You don't want that.
Mm-hmm. It's individuation.
I actually think, that might be, it's like a psychology of the future is probably the direction we're looking at. So like we're going through that where, as I said, the people are going into denominations. People are going to trad mass. People are going into Orthodox. Yeah. People are going to go to Hellenism. Survive the Jive is going to set up his pagan religions. But the thing is that that's all going to happen at once in every direction, like Protestantism.
Right. But my point is, let's pick a random city in the United States, New Orleans. There's a certain culture in New Orleans. Someone laughed about this. I'm just thinking of something that's like everyone can identify as Mardi Gras.
Sure.
Right? New Orleans has a culture. That culture is New Orleans. So New Orleans, people in New Orleans, if they were to set up their own sort of like local pagan temple, it would be based on New Orleans. It would be based on their culture, based on their history, based on their ancestors. But that's, to me, it doesn't have to be necessarily nationalistic in a political sense. I think what people are striving for is sort of a community that they can go to where they feel like they're a part of something big. Even if it's like a small little temple dedicated to one little god that everyone gets around. I don't know.
But here's the problem that you guys haven't talked about yet. Neuralink, Facebook, all of this interconnectedness that the normies are going into right now, they're creating AI stand-up comics who are much better and much more interesting than any stand-up comic that goes on Joe Rogan's show nowadays. And I really think that the normies, not just the boomers, but even the millennials afterwards, as well as the zoomers, they're all going to be captured into their own snake eating its own tail, dopamine feeding drip. And when it comes to those people, we were discussing this yesterday, Neal. When it comes to the people who are going to get to the next level of having Neuralink in their heads, now you're going to have this thing that's going to will you into maybe even exercising or walking around, but it's not going to be using your own willpower. It's going to be the machine telling you what to do
bizarre.
and when to do it. And when you get to that point, what are we even talking about as far as humanity? We're not talking about people anymore. We're talking about robots pretty much.
Yeah,
and what's the differentiation between them versus the people who are going to follow the path of Uberboyo or the path of Neal or the path of Survive the Jive?
I think because obviously philosophy has to be the underlying sort of teacher to how you do your theology. I think Platonism offers a sort of worldview that can be used as a sort of model, even if it necessarily doesn't map on nature the way someone like Nietzsche would say. I think for like religious purposes, though, it works.
Let me grab Lev first to just kind of conclude the thoughts. So you're bringing up something about Neuralink and technology. So what am I sort of saying? I'm pointing out that with these trends, you're seeing essentially people do TikTok religiosity, like a Protestant revolution, where instead of going into books and creating their own version of Christianity, they're going on the internet and finding niche subcultures and just doing everything from all the way to atheist rational religions to like hardcore trad-cath traditional religions to Islam. It's a Protestant situation. Now, why is that important? Because it's like the conscience has gradually been being liberated over the last 1,000 years. Protestantism, like if you look at the Renaissance, during the Renaissance, there was a huge stress on humanism and the human soul. Yeah. And then you see in Protestantism an extension of this into like you can literally decide your own version of Christianity, which is like fucking nuts. It's like, well, that's a big step, guys. And now we're at this point where it's like you can almost decide your own version of reality. And the thing that matters is your conscience, the information, your soul. And when we're talking about remote viewing and we're talking about the subtle body and we're talking about inside the mind and inside the soul, that's actually what you discover. You discover that. And maybe a meta myth that we're going to go through, maybe something that is unifying, is that we're coming up against now this offer where a lot of people are going to get the devil's bargain, where it's like you could use this as your conscience,
the mark
and you
of the
could
beast.
sellotape this here.
We're already there.
Exactly. The phone is already this. So this could be installed inside of your head, and then it could replace the imagination. You could have generative AI, and you don't need an imagination anymore.
Advertising in your dreams, just like Futurama predicted.
And dreams being created by the AI informing you like a conscience, like a voice in your head, telling you what to do. Yeah. That is legitimately could be there. And if you want to call like what's an NPC or a fallen one or like someone who's not a part of the religion, it might be those who choose
Titanic nature.
Exactly. To absorb into that, and they become part of like a Borg. Maybe that's a meta myth that crosses everything. But I don't think it answers the Zoomer nationalism problem.
Wait, but before that, going back to the topic of the end of the world, what you're describing the way is pure Frashgard. Because here we are having this differentiation. Who are the people that are going to get burned by the molten metal of technology and fire? Because in the way all of technology, all the ones and zeros, it is like pieces of metal, or, you could say like silicon is also a kind of metal, as it were, pieces of metal that are now going to be burning once life as we know it starts dissolving. And who are the people that are going to pass through that like passing through warm milk? Those are going to be the people who are probably going to be meditating, probably going to figure out a way into the astral realm, or something like that. Those may be the people who are going to make it through. Meanwhile, the people who are going to be stuck into their devices. Like imagine if Giorgiani's spectral revolution comes true, which is the idea that the more people are going to study various psychic phenomena, the more it's going to start imprinting itself in our lives. All of a sudden, if you're wearing some kind of a 3D VR device, or God forbid, one of those Neuralink things, all of a sudden things are going to start glitching out. And the world that you're trying to hide yourself in, the goon cave, is all of a sudden going to also turn into some kind of a nightmare, because now certain people who have figured out a way into the astral realm have also figured out a way that they could influence all these lower realms of Plato's goon cave. And now all of a sudden, all of these people who sought security in these devices are going to be experiencing a world of hurt. Because by the way, here's another Lev prediction. I think that as things get more spectral out in this real, quote unquote, real world, the world that people are going to be experiencing in the magical virtual reality is going to be really dull and boring and standard.
That's the thing. When that starts to happen, humans who are going to notice these things will will make commentary on it, whether it's through memes, whether it's through art or music or film. There will be commentary on this stuff. There will be a balancing out of this stuff. Like when communism was thriving, you get writers like Dostoevsky, you get writers who are making commentary on the horrors of communism, and that influences people to act against communism.
But this is what's so fascinating. This is what's so white pilling about the human spirit. We all get addicted to the phones, and the algorithm starts to form our like techno conscience. And on the phones, you see meme culture come up and completely subvert all the lies of the regime.
Yeah.
And it's like our imagination.
It fixes itself. That's what I'm saying. That's why I said people will put commentary on this stuff when it's necessary. The same myths were told about writing. Hermes and Thoth. There was myths where Hermes or Thoth, if it's in the Egyptian sources, gives mankind writing, and they were all like, oh no, everyone's going to be stupid. They're not going to be able to memorize anything. They're going to be relying on their papyri all the time. And it's like, there probably was some truth to that. Humanity probably lost some of its mental capacity from writing. But it also gave us record keeping. It also, like, there's going to be some good coming out of all this.
And it could also be a training device. For instance, think of the example of the monk that goes up into the mountain in order to meditate and then comes down in the moment like a prostitute passes him by, he gets really, really horny, versus a monk who lives among the prostitutes and is so in control over his thoughts and actions while being in the belly of the beast. So when it comes to the memes that are around us and all of these various indulgences, if we are able to be in that world but not of that
some
world,
sort of diamond will come out of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I agree.
There's also another thing about technology that people aren't pessimistic enough in technology. This has been studied actually a few times. If you train AI on AI generated data, so if Neal goes into his dreams and generates a load of dreams and I train an AI on it, it will be able to like do stuff with that. Now, if I get ChatGPT and I'd be like, give me a data set, and I take it out and then I send that data set into Grok and I'm like, tell me what this data set does. And then I keep doing this where it's like a snake eating its own tail.
Yeah.
What happens is the AIs break down in coherency and they literally just start to generate like nonsense after a while.
Yes.
It's like there needs to be the input of data. That's the core thing. And data can come from us. And for some reason that's original, or real life is the other one as well. So if we're generating, we are like the first principle that sets off, and these things are almost like amplifiers. So that's the kind of slavery problem where you start to think that this can be your imagination and your conscience when really it probably could serve it. But if you get that priority wrong, you're going to fuck yourself up royally.
I want to jump in there with some Steiner.
Okay.
And this is sort of a counterpoint to the Giorgiani references. Giorgiani doesn't like Steiner, but that's a whole other story. You're bringing up imagination as a way of escaping this descent into mechanization. And what Steiner would say about that is that it's a process from imagination into inspiration into intuition, and it's predictive of a descent into a mechanized state, whereby it becomes more and more important for each person to be able to access this universal knowledge on an individual basis. So instead of having this generational check to provide authenticity to other people coming down from learned experience, it then becomes the responsibility of each individual person to be able to access it on their own. There's also with that sort of this sense by which if you can't do it, you're fucked.
Yeah.
I think not everybody's going.
I think that's what the trends are saying. I think with like the TikTok techno-religiosity, which again, I really am stressing this because it's fascinating to see these macro trends. People are saying, I believe in higher powers and I'm participating in religious rituals. People are saying this, but I'm learning it from technology and TikTok and influencers, and they're my priests, and I'm not going to institutions as much. Some people do, but not everybody. And that's exactly what you're saying. It's almost like an individuated version of this.
That's why I think that needs to be harnessed at some level.
But there is an issue there too, which is when you have these priests, what about audience capture?
Like Ye.
What about Ye is a good example, but I would offer all of the, or most of the social media influences out there, especially since Elon Musk took over Twitter. We've been having a lot of these people who, whatever they say is not because they actually believe it, or they may start to believe it because enough of their audiences believes it to be so. So it does end up becoming like a snake eating its own tail thing, where you're not doing this because you truly think that this is the way, but because you know that if you say this, you're going to get a lot more likes, people are going to share your posts. You know, it's like it's a very naked thing that not a lot of people like talking about. Now, Steph, when it comes to the audience capture thing, I think all of us here in this room have a little bit of this seduction that comes from if we appeal to things that we know the people are going to like, it's going to be better for us financially. We're going to make a lot more money. We're going to be able to provide for our family or our future family. So there is sort of a survival mechanism that feeds the beast of popular opinion. How do we make sure that we're able to see what the truth is as best as we can and ensure that the truth gets out there while still not alienating our audience if, for example, we find out something that we know that the people who follow us are not going to like?
Yeah, like this is again there's a implicit suggestion here that following along with an audience and its instincts is inherently evil or wrong or bad or in the way of the truth. Like why this is like what I'm saying about this part of your brain.
Yeah.
If this part of your brain is firing on, you'll implicitly have a moral perspective where you'll take your tribe and your religion and your belief in God and you'll fight for its side and you will be closed-minded. You literally actually develop more cognitive dissonance. Maybe that's an argument of, again, the way of the truth. But you can also see that true people who have accepted religions in the past and ideologies, they actually use them almost like a lens to access God or the truth. So, for example, there's loads of Catholics who would have been absolute chudded out on Catholicism, or Muslims or Jews that would chud out on the idea that my one way of seeing things, my tribe, is the right thing. But weirdly, even though that does come with a closed-mindedness, it also, in its own way, forms a lens that allows them to penetrate through that and see the truth. And there's an implication that in order for you to see the truth, you must develop this alternate morality where you shear out tribalism and belief and become this sort of like sterilized atheist that is able to like see things clearly, if you so will. And I do think, yes, there's an aspect of that that's, if you're able to do that, that's a good skill. But there's then this additional implication that all this other way of thinking is like in the way. And I don't think that's the correct way to look at it.
It's a gradient, right, of being too porous when you allow too much alternate information in where, well, I could consider this point of view or I could consider that point of view versus what you're talking about, which is being much more direct, much more focused, yes, being closed-minded, but at the same time, having enough of a shield around you to ensure that a lot of the good principles that you have are not going to be taken advantage of. The only counter that I would offer here is that I think that within this environment, there do exist certain predators who would masquerade as being part of your team, where they could say, well, true. I believe in God, I believe in this and that.
There's a phenomenal example of this. So the GOP in America, and like, again, I'm not American, so I don't know this stuff inside out, they have a strategy called the Southern Strategy, all right? So the Southern Strategy is the Republican right wing who go to the South states, they learned this in like the 40s, and if they act a little bit racist, if they're like, fucking black people, man, the white Southerners will vote for them basically like in just en masse.
Right.
And they will
That's
win.
where you get blue dog Democrats from. Like Bill Clinton was one of these guys.
Yeah.
You act like a Southerner a little bit.
And they crush because of this, because they all just like they're like, the white guy's going to help me. Trump did this a little bit. You know? Lyndon B. Johnson, the Democrat who signed a civil, like they do similar things. Like he was saying that like we'll give black people the civil rights thing or something like this. I don't know. Again, I don't know this stuff. And he's like quoted off like record and stuff like this.
With just, the hard R.
Yeah, just all the time, just being like, these guys, these idiots, these black idiots are going to vote for us for 60 years after this. And so it's this idea that you can, if you're intelligent and you're a political operator, you can predatorily be like, these stupid chuds. I can go in and I can just dangle in front of them whatever chudism that they like. And I can, and you see this happening right now. You see Keir Starmer over in England. He's like,
Machiavellian.
We're going to kick out the migrants. The migrants, if you're a migrant, you can't come in here anymore. This is like libtard. It's Keir Starmer.
Yeah.
Why is he doing that? Because he gets it now. He's like, all I need to do is just give these guys a carrot and these stupid chuds will just fucking
And
go
the
on.
Russians, by the way, have been getting it for an extremely long amount of time, which is why I think you're seeing this connection to, Putin being like this based, naked horse riding guy, versus all these foolish NATO globalists, and Russia is like this trad place. They've been working on the right wing for an extremely long amount of time.
But this is why I keep getting back to local tradition being huge. Like when we look back when the Roman Empire was so successful before Caracalla just made everyone a citizen. What were they doing that was working? Where they respected local traditions.
Yeah.
if you went to Syria, you had the Syrian cults there. You went to Egypt, they had Serapis. They had in Athens, they had Athena, and whatever. And then every city had their local ancestral customs, but they all sort of understood this like unifying culture, which is Rome. Today, what are we seeing people like completely complain about is immigration. They're sick of immigrants. They're sick of people not being pious anymore or not caring about being good. Well, if you think about that, if local traditions were still thriving like they're not anymore, you would have people going to Ireland and respecting Irish customs. They wouldn't go there and just be like, "Oh, I'm in the EU, so I don't care if you're Turkish or whatever. As long as it's Europe, it's all the same." You wouldn't have that. You would have going to Ireland means I'm going to adopt the Irish customs while I'm there. And what that would do is it would actually make people want to immigrate less because they're only going to go to whatever they're comfortable with. They're going to stay in their own places.
It's a really good point.
Yeah, and if everybody had their own local customs that they cherished, all these problems would go away.
That's actually a really good point. There's a meme on the right, the Globo Homo meme, which basically means global gay project, I think. And,
or homogeneity. That's
so
the other way.
The left used the left used to actually use that term. I mean, global homogenization, which is like homogenize milk to make sure all the milk fats are equal among it. So like it's been adopted by the right to mean like all the pride fags and all this. But it actually started from it's a liberal view, and it was actually precisely that. The liberals used to say this. They used to say capitalism, because they hate capitalism, is going around the world and commodifying everything and getting rid of traditions like Irish culture and Greek culture and they show up and they rip out the Greek temple and put a fucking McDonald's in it. That type of thing. It's like Starbucks and McDonald's. And that was this big criticism from the left. And it's so interesting seeing how these like memes, because it's actually like the thing you were just saying about this chud tribalism. The left are very guilty of falling for the woke ideological stuff that made them give up on all these very intelligent principles they had. They were they had these really sophisticated perspectives that people would be like, that's so based. They'd love that stuff now. They're talking about global homogenization, Hitchens being like radical free speech. I'm sure people would have loved that on the internet now. But because they were able to get controlled by political predators, they lost all their vril and all this. And I think the right is actually very vulnerable to this right now. The right is ascendant because of all these trends I'm talking about. And it is a problem where you're getting a load of absolute retards that are leading it, and they will destroy the movement. And it's a really big issue because that's how predators can come in and take advantage of it and spin it and just neutralize it and get rid of its like serious concerns. And like what Neal is saying, I think is a really good point.
And this would benefit other cultures like African culture or like they would have their own culture. People would go there and respect their culture, and then they would go back. It would actually make people be able to travel the world and not have to worry about like issues of not respecting a certain culture, because everybody would have the understanding, when I'm in this city, this is their way, this is what they do, these are sacred laws that was laid down by their ancestors, and that's how the Roman world was operating. And I think the only religion that can survive in a world that's the opposite of that's homogenized, as you said, is something like Christianity, which actually wants that. They want everyone to be equal playing field. They want average Joes. They don't want local customs. They don't want that.
It's just like Christianity is like a global home.
Yeah.
Wow. And I guess that's sort of like, wow, that's a really interesting point. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I never thought of it like that. And then the kind of countervailing force is like Survive the Jive being like, no, resurrect the traditional stuff.
I'm sorry. He's in England, or is he? He's in England.
England.
Yeah. So he's standing on England as like, England is this way. We're English. This is how we want it. But every place has a right to be that way. That is how we're just naturally wired that way to be tribal in that sense. And that's why I think people are becoming so disillusioned in this time, because that's gone now. Everyone's supposed to just whether you're in New York or you're in Cairo, everything's going to be the same. Like no one wants that.
It's like this comic on 4chan, which I saw all the time, of this grumpy old man in the KKK outfit who started taking vacations to different parts of the world, and he ended up experiencing all these different flavors. Going to Asia, going to Africa, and then afterwards he like burned or threw away his KKK outfit. That's like one panel. In the other panel, he went to all these countries, yet everything was multicultural. Everything was the same homogenous blob, and then he came back back and he still kept his KKK hood on. So
Yeah, if you want to get rid of
mean-
fascism or racism, you should travel. And it's like the picture of Hitler in Paris. you know,
Yeah.
that type of thing.
Well, multiculturalism works if it's multinational. This country has their culture. This country has their culture. When you try to take multiculturalism and put it all into just spread it out like it's like a topping on bread, it just doesn't work.
And you know who would agree with us? Douglas Murray.
Really?
There we go. See, that's the thing. I think that one of the
You keep bringing
reasons
up
why...
Douglas Murray.
No, I am bringing him up for a very important reason. Because I think there has been this almost immune system response on behalf of some of these predators to label somebody like Murray as being somebody not worth the time of somebody like Steph, for instance. Even though I think like if you got together with Murray, sat down, I think you guys would agree on a lot.
You okay? Fair enough. I am straw manning him. That's absolutely true because Douglas is definitely the best of I would consider that group. I've been very scarred by James Lindsay.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So the woke right stuff and all that.
Yeah, I don't think it makes any sense.
And I really think Jordan Peterson has really shot himself in the foot because Jordan Peterson worked with I actually think it might have been the ADL to get the Christ is King thing categorized as evil troll demonism and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And look, I get it. They're doing what they're doing. But my point is that the zeitgeist is showing us that the Zoomers are kicking into gear and developing a set of instincts that are
that's what I care about.
Yeah, you could say are like
That's the future, whether we like it or not.
That's the future. And you also have to say Jordan Peterson saying stuff like that. Those instincts inside those Zoomers are mental illness. And that's insane because you're literally describing a part of the mind, a deep institution that has generated religion. So he's trying to shill this religiosity that's very shallow, that he doesn't seem to even believe himself, and then counter signal the other instincts that come along with it. And it's sort of it's just completely dishonest. It sounds stupid. It makes us I would say I'm reactionary right, by the way, but it makes us reactionaries look like stupid because then the people on the liberals on the left and people maybe on the fence, importantly, look at Jordan Peterson and he's saying this incoherent nonsense. And you're like, why, what's going on with this? And the woke right thing, it just sounds dumb. It sounds stupid. Yeah. And I'm lumping Douglas in with that. I think, in my mind, they're all just they're actually having an immune response because they're losing control of the youth in the situation.
What is woke about it? Is it why are they? I don't understand why that word is being used.
So that's actually my point here is that all right, if we're going to use these words, let's try to be objective about them. Let's not project. I'm trying my best not to project my emotions into it. Yeah. If I wanted to project my emotions, I'd be like, there's no cognitive dissonance in this part. No, there is, and this is a serious problem with tribalism, and it might actually be a terminal problem. And I get that, and that's important. But I'm trying to point out that you've got woke morality in the brain. That's really objective. Yeah. So if you're just going to say woke right, it doesn't make any sense. It's it's nonsense. And that's terrible because then you're anti-intellectual. You're sloppy. You're making people look stupid. You're lowering the level of the conversation. This type of stuff. And
calling it a disease, that makes all of the Zoomers that are now thinking, oh, you think I'm a disease? You think that what this is going on is just a disease? Fuck you. So what I would say in response when it comes to somebody like Murray is that even though you may not agree with how much, let's say, violence or force will need to be applied in order to solve certain problems, I think you do agree on the problems. But here is one place where we may disagree for now, but may not disagree later on. If we go back to this whole end of the world thing that we were talking about, what you're talking about is seeing how these cycles work. Because what we're discussing when it comes to the strong men making good times making weak men making hard times making strong men, that is the way that the world worked. Now the question, though, is whether we're going through this kind of Frashgard, whether we're going through some kind of alchemical transformation where maybe the people like Murray and, even like Sam Harris do have a point where you don't need to always follow the cycle. You can observe the cycle. You shouldn't bullshit about what it is like you're doing. You're being very aware of what the cycle is. But now the next step is to ask ourselves, are we so slavish and subservient to this cycle that we don't have any choice, or is there a way out of it?
I understand what you're saying, but you're morally loading your words. You're saying, for example, this cycle of the reinvigoration of, I will call it nationalist, faithful instincts in the Zoomers. You're calling that slavish, implying that you're putting a moral bad. It's like a Nietzsche, you know, you're reevaluating a moral word and putting it
the
on
question if you think about it.
And it's just a phenomenon that you don't have to morally judge it. It could be bad. The cognitive dissonance could be terrible inside of it, I agree. But it also could be a signal of incredible health. And this is what I mean. This is Douglas's big mistake, is that instinct is waking up. And it's rising, and it's ferocious, and it is nationalistic. It's probably closed-minded, and it seems like it's connected to faith. And he did come in and basically say, oh, experts need to almost basically suppress this, and us intellectuals are above this, and we're better than this, and this is a sign of chudism, and this is bad. He almost like didn't...
Wait, Murray did?
He comes in and he's basically saying like these instincts that are rising up, they can't have any health attached to them, and especially Jordan Peterson as well. He comes in and he's like categorizing this stuff as mental illness, and they're all in that milieu where they are kind of loading this a little bit too much. Now, again, I think Murray is the best out of the bad lot. But
I don't think Murray would say that these need to be suppressed at all. I think what he's advocating for is having somebody who can push back, and then hell, let the other person push back as well, and let's actually figure out what exactly is correct here without just having this appeal to the audience that's always going to like and share the things that are the most sensational. Because I think a lot of
again, like this is bad faith, because you're suggesting that the instincts in the audience necessarily are wrong and bad.
Not wrong always, not bad always. I think the instincts are based on wanting things that are a lot more romantic. It's not that interesting to hear somebody say what everybody could already agree on, you know, like water is wet, the sky is blue. You know what I mean? Like certain things that are just like basic, bitch, boring reality. But then all of a sudden, if somebody goes and says, oh, Michelle Obama's secretly a man, you know, already something like that.
Okay, that's fair enough.
You know
I
mean?
understand
like,
that. Yeah, I understand
it's
that.
It's very tempting for people to get into that. And I think Murray's whole point was that I have no problem with this stuff being talked about at all. I don't want to censor anybody. All I want is that if you're going to have like a big program like Joe Rogan, bring somebody in who can like test this, who can get to the bottom of like how true this is. And you know what? Maybe if it takes more than one podcast episode to go through it, as long as you're not shutting down the conversation, you know, convening the council and shutting it down, as long as you're not doing that, then I think that that's a pretty good way of going about it.
So I'm kind of accusing Douglas Murray of strawmanning the situation, but you're correct. I'm also strawmanning him, because he's probably looking at like Candace Owens. I mean, like this is a retard parade if we're not careful. Like she's literally like trying to rehabilitate Harvey Weinstein right now, and you're like looking at that and you're like, what is it? Like, I thought she was a Nazi. Like, what's going on here? Like, where are we? Like, what's this? Like, what's happening? So the point is that like, you're right. There's a lot of stupidity. And if he's really holding firm and just being like, let's have higher intellectual standards, fair enough. But,
and to be clear, one more thing, when we're talking about the Zoomers being in this slavish state, I do not by any means mean that if we're talking about nationalism, that is slavishness. That is a very appropriate response to what's going on. Of course, we have to have a healthier country. We have to make sure that the people are taken care of. The difference, I would say, where the slavishness comes in, number one, that has to do with the algorithm. It has to do with what we were talking about before. And number two, it has to do with the next step, where the people like Murray would say, like, yes, we have to do all the things having to do with deporting the people who would spit at our culture and, you know, laugh at our naivete of inviting them in the first place. But at the same time, the slavishness, I think, comes in where people are willing to do anything in order to, again, like, I'm sorry to keep bringing Mr. H up, but elect somebody like a Hitler 2.0 just because they think, guys, this is the only way, fuck it, we've already wasted enough time as it is. And their impatience will end up creating a monster. They're going to be opening up different kinds of Pandora's box that way.
I'll get into Caesarism after this, but I actually would love to hear from Neal, because we've kind of been like banging on about Douglas Murray. But the thing you brought up earlier, I think, is a really good point about that idea of like truly connecting with organic culture. Yeah. Because you yourself...
On a local level.
And you just...
If you want your culture to survive, you got to stand on it. You're strong. You got to hold it together.
Yeah.
Like, you can't just expect it to hold itself together.
And I think this is like what you notice with a lot of this online stuff, is because that's not there, we actually have this propensity to go into the conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
And then like the most outlandish... It's like entertainment. It's like
Right.
entertainment brain stuff. Whereas imagine you just went to the Hellenes out there in Greece.
It's actually the exact opposite of being on your phone. You're getting off your phone, going to the people that literally live right next door to you, and engaging with them, starting a culture based on your past, your history, your legends, your shared culture, and then solidifying that for the next generation, and then the next generation, and then the next generation. And if everyone did that on a local level, you would have a world where people have cultures that they're proud of in every city you went to, and you would go to that city and you would respect that culture while you're there, and it would prevent people from just moving to wherever they're going to have the best, I don't know, welfare opportunity or whatever, because you're less likely to move to a culture that's foreign to you if they're strong about their culture and they're strong about how you should be when you're around them. And this goes for everybody. If I went to Egypt, I should respect Egyptian culture.
Well, that culture doesn't need to be based on geography or ethnicity necessarily either.
No, not necessarily. I don't think, right, but I do. Those things do matter, though, as far as like cohesive culture. But I do think people can also assimilate, and I think like you and I were talking about, what would you rather have? Would you rather have 100% country that's all the same exact race as you, everyone looks like you, talks like you, but everyone's on drugs and everyone's completely corrupt and they're all like atheists or something? Or would you rather live in a culture where you look like different than everyone else and you're completely the opposite of what everyone else looks like, but that culture is a bunch of smart, brilliant thinkers, and they're all like pious and they're all really good people? I would rather be in that culture. This is the latter. So I don't think it necessarily has to be genetics, but I do think people have the right to sort of care about those things. It does matter when it comes to culture.
It's interesting, though, that the Christians would take what you're talking about regarding having the different people, but they would not base the judgment being on whether or not they're philosophically minded or individuated. They would base it on whether they're Christian or not.
Yeah.
Well, that means that's proxy for moral. So that's like saying, and this is actually very interesting, again, with the brain study stuff, but like, why does this posterior medial frontal cortex create cognitive dissonance? Why does it do that? Because that's really scary. It's like a healthy part of our brain generates closed-mindedness. Like, so it's a legit, really good criticism of the right-wing morality and the chud. Like the chuds have this problem. But why does nature do that? Because nature realizes that if you were to function in a tribe, you need to almost like honor the tribe and its customs it's like a hive, an ant hive.
Yeah.
You have to sacrifice yourself as an individual if you want to survive. Because in nature, you cannot do it yourself. You need the tribe. And it's actually important to deify the tribe and give up your individuality. And that's what cognitive dissonance does. This is so fascinating, all right? What happens with cognitive dissonance is we're in this little group, and maybe I, in my mind, think like Douglas Murray is an idiot, but everyone else is like, he's brilliant, right? And I'm worried that if I say Douglas Murray's an idiot, Lev will pull out his Lev axe and just cut my head off right here. And I'll be like, no, I die. So my mind will detect the tribe. The posterior medial frontal cortex will know the tribe. It will be scanning like Sauron. And it will detect, this is so interesting, it looks at my own head, it sees that I think that Douglas Murray is like unbased, but then it detects that Lev and everyone else thinks he's super based, and so it makes my thoughts go. It literally suppresses.
It's that inner daimon that Socrates talked about.
Yes,
That's what that is.
but it suppresses that.
Yeah,
and then
it
gives me a story to make it coherent. It will say something like, Douglas Murray is massively misunderstood by people. He's too smart for any of us to understand.
I don't even know who Douglas Murray is.
So I'm just going to go along with this. So cognitive dissonance has this like profound ability to rewire your reality to make you go along with the tribe.
Yeah.
It literally does close down your thinking and make you like non-critical, not self-aware, unconscious. It makes you lie to yourself. It makes you rationalize. It does all these things. And it's inside a part of yourself that seems to be key to live. Like that is a very fascinating thing. The turning on of the chud nationalism it closes your mind.
Yeah.
And what do psychedelics do? Psychedelics are demonstrated to increase open-mindedness. Openness to experience.
Expand your mind, man.
Yeah, so it melts, like Terence McKenna says, it melts boundaries, which it does have that effect.
Yeah.
When you think about this Gnosticism, like early Christianity shows up like a Protestant revolution. There's just fucking thousands of versions of Gnosticism and Christianity going on.
Yeah.
And then the church comes in like this chud, hard rye, project that says, right, now this is going to be a Roman thing we're going to do from now on.
Right.
And you're all going to follow these fucking rules. And then all this Gnosticism is banned.
Yeah,
Fuck
Nicene
this.
Creed was like, we're going to have strict dogma now. going
Exactly,
forward.
yeah. So they bring in closed-mindedness and ideology, and they close the project. So I think like a lot of right-wingers who go to Catholicism
That's what they see.
are attaching to this.
Yeah.
But then you say, like, what is Christianity? Christianity is this...
In its roots, it's different, though.
It's like a caustic, dissolving, Gnostic, radical, anti-form cult. It's like a psychedelic. Like Christ is like a psychedelic nearly.
You know what's interesting? You brought up boundaries, where I was just reading about this, and that's book right here, actually. Jill Harris points out that the day that Diocletian passed the edict that made the Eucharist illegal and basically like put real persecutions on the Christians, probably for the first time ever, because all the other persecutions before that were not really persecutions. They were just like one guy got in trouble here and there. Finally, right around 303 AD, Diocletian's like, I've had enough of these Christians. He passes this edict. The day he did it was at a festival of the god Terminus, the god of oaths and boundaries, and it terminates this. So this god is known for terminating people who cross boundaries. Diocletian issued the edict to make Christianity illegal on the day of his anniversary of the festival of Terminus. And so it was fitting that the god Terminus, we're going to offer him Christianity on the altar. That's what they were trying to do. But the reason why, if you read a couple years before that, Diocletian actually reached out and wrote something down. He didn't write it, but it gets recorded by Lactantius in a later source, where he's trying to like reason with the Christians and going, look, I want you guys to be in my empire too. I don't want to shut you down, but please stop getting in the way of Roman customs. Stop getting in the way of sacrifices. Stop getting in the way of sacred games. Just please, you can do your own Christian shit and wherever you want to do it. Just stop getting in the way of our customs. And they couldn't listen. So finally he had enough. And on the day of the Terminus festival, he said, let's shut down Christianity.
That's crazy. Do you know what that's crazy is? Like, I got in so much trouble for saying Christianity is the woke movement of Rome.
Yeah.
Because in a way, you see this now where like the conservatives are sort of like, can we not just live in this American empire and be capitalist and have our diversity of liberal opinions? Like, we'll be classical liberals and we'll all have our opinions. And the woke are like, we want to fucking destroy your culture. We wanted to annihilate and replace it.
This is what was happening.
And it's so funny because
it's exactly what was happening.
It's like this caustic, almost Gnostic energy that's trying to shear everything apart to create something new,
and it shatters boundaries. It's poetic that he did it that way.
Yeah,
because it's what, and it comes back to this whole conversation of like people clinging to nationalism. Zoomers that nationalism is like people in 60, 70 years old getting into. These are Zoomers in their 20s talking about being nationalists because where the boundaries are gone now. I mean, people want boundaries again.
Now, was this something that was going on during the Christian times as far as something like the Book of Revelation goes? Because a lot of the conversations I've had about that book has to do with it not being a prediction about the future, but rather being a prediction about what was going on back then in Rome with Nero, people like that. But like we were just talking about, all of this Christian stuff seems to be repeating now with the woke movement and the reaction to that movement. Do you see the Book of Revelation as playing out?
So the Book of Revelation was written by a dude who's writing about he even says it in chapter, I think it's chapter 5, I think it is, in Revelation, where he says, 5 kings have fallen and 2 more are coming. And he's describing Augustus, Tiberius, Caligula, Claudius, and Nero. Those 5 are gone. 2 more to come. He's talking about Vespasian and his son Titus. And then the third one would be the second beast, which is Domitian. So in maps on, he's talking about a specific time period. He's talking about Rome, the beast with seven tails or whatever. It's the 7 hills of Rome. The beast is Rome. It's called Babylon. It was a code name that Christians called. The reason why they called it Babylon is because when the first temple fell, it was because the Babylonians came and took him over. Now the second temple falls, it's Rome, it's Babylon 2.0. So what are they doing? They're mapping on old images from Zechariah and Isaiah and Jeremiah and Daniel, especially Daniel with the 4 beasts, and they're mapping it on the current 1st century era. So the way it gets written is very vague, and it can be reapplied. So every era that goes by, you're always in the end times. Because Jesus even says, some of you right here I won't even taste death before I come back. Well, that prophecy failed. They're all dead. Paul in his letters is like, any day now, the world's going to end. Any day now, just get ready.
Or a Pope Sylvester.
Yeah, make sure you're not doing anything sinful while it happens. Like, and thousands of years have gone by, and the end of the world hasn't happened yet. You said Pope Sylvester, 1000 AD, in case anyone's wondering why he said that. The Pope that was living in the year 1000 was Pope Sylvester. So the second, he thought, because Revelation says, and then the 1,000-year reign will end and Satan will come back. He thought 1,000 years, it's right now. The end of the world has to be right now. So he literally issued a message from the Vatican telling them, get ready, because this is it. Time is up. And of course that came and went. So now all of a sudden, now in the modern world today, you get Christians going, oh, the mark of the beast? Neuralink maybe. Oh, the 7-headed thing? Oh, I saw a commercial, the person had 7 heads. And they're just reapplying these stuff to today. And no matter what time period we're in, it's always going to be the end times, and Christians will always take those models that you got from the Bible, and they're just going to reapply it. So of course you can do that, but it's like, so what,
But things do, I think, mythopoetically end up rhyming in life. So, for example, Neuralink, I think, is a good example of the mark of the beast. But to me, what's interesting is that giant golden cube. It's the end of the world now. It's the restoration of this new Jerusalem.
Yeah, you're talking about New Jerusalem?
Yeah, New Jerusalem.
Yeah, that's this idea that the world of the fleshy world, if you're talking about the flesh being evil, being completely destroyed and thrown into the lake of fire, and then a new heavenly realm, a new Jerusalem for Christians is going to sort of come on top of this world, and it's going to be a spiritual, eternal, heavenly realm that Christians will take part of.
Yeah, it sounds a lot like Frashgard as well, though.
It does. It's eschatology.
Yeah, I think the point I was trying to make earlier is that these things are psychological archetypes. So this is why I'm trying to point out that in early Christianity, you're seeing these psychological archetypes. Flesh is evil, sexuality is an impulsive thing, cut your dick off and escape this world and go into your soul. The huge phenomenon all of these people are saying is that you have a soul that's trapped in the flesh, and that's a good thing. When you were a kid, when you imagined before you had a dick or before your dick hit puberty, you could just sit there for hours and just think and imagine stuff. And that's a signal that you have a glorious soul.
Yeah.
And that's what you are. And you love animals when you let that soul think. But then when your belly starts to talk, you have to kill the animals. So there's something about your flesh that you need to break free from. So this is like a psychological archetype. And this leads to Heaven's Gate. Heaven's Gate is the same way of looking at things.
I got something for you.
You see the woke movement is the same way of looking at things. So I think in Revelations you see a similar thing where there's this huge emotive need for us to give a idea of what's the point of the world, what's the point of our future, what's going to happen in the future, will the kingdom of heaven come? This is why when you look at Kurzweil and the AI guys, they're literally using religious motifs. There's going to be a giant Borg machine we're going to create, which is heaven. There's going to be a rapture where we upload our souls, the flame of consciousness, into this machine. And this machine then is going to absorb us all and lift us up into this heaven that is free from the flesh. The flesh bodies will be left behind, and we'll be able to move out of these flesh bodies into machine bodies, into digital bodies where we can live forever. And it's just because, I shouldn't say it's just because, but this psychological architecture just keeps resurrecting because there's a great urge inside of man to escape from this. In fact, I would say that a lot of the AI stuff is a Gnostic movement. Yeah. A lot of these techno-transhuman futurists are in some sense trying to escape in the same way that the Gnostics were. Heaven's Gate even used the word transhuman.
Do you know that there are any sects who talk about how that is also an easy way out to say that if we escape from this physical world into some magical fairyland, we are abandoning the project that is this physical world that is actually meant for us to work on it in order to transform this physical world into more of a spiritual world?
No, the real Gnosticism is fundamentally pessimistic. It's like Buddhism. There's no way you can't fix samsara. This is real pessimism.
So this would be Sethian, because when you talk about Gnosticism, there's 100 different, as we were pointing out, there's 100 different denominations. You're right. Generally, and the Sethians were a big early Christian sect early on, and they believed exactly what you're saying, that the flesh is evil to escape this realm. The only reason I'm pointing out is not everyone held to this doctrine. The Valentinians didn't hold to this doctrine. The Valentinians were very much rational philosopher types. But yeah, generally, the Gnostics did have this idea that the flesh was evil, the earth was a trap, and you're supposed to ascend to the higher ions, which is like Sophia and wisdom and all that stuff.
It's like the movie The Matrix.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
Like, can you?
The Gnostics were the first Matrix
Can you
guys.
be like, can we
Yeah.
fix the world? It's like the fucking world is a computer simulation ran by
Right.
an evil AI. Like, what are you going to fix?
There's nothing to fix here,
There's-
right?
You have to get out.
Exactly.
And that's like
Through
real,
gnosis.
real Gnosticism. Yeah.
I agree with that.
You know, I think the only group that actually does talk about fixing this world, you know what it is? It's the Jews
And Nietzsche.
Yeah.
and Nietzsche. There
Well,
we
you know
go.
what's interesting about
Yeah.
the difference between post 4th century Nicene Creed Christianity that the Romans are in control of and the roots of Christianity being completely different, as we pointed out, with Christians castrating themselves and living like communists outside of the Roman zeitgeist, which we find with the Carpocratians, for example. Carpocratians dropped out of society and they set up their own little communes in the deserts, and they just completely didn't. They weren't offering anything to the Roman Empire. They weren't paying taxes. They were completely gone. They were following true Christianity because in Luke 14, Jesus tells them, "If you come to me but will not leave your family, you cannot be my follower.
Wow.
You must love me more than your father, mother, wife, children, brothers, and sisters, and even more than your own life." That's a true Christian right there. And then,
Isn't that the famous quote where he says, "I come not to bring peace, but a sword"?
but a sword, right? This is
people are
real
like,
Christianity,
this
right?
is so base. But then the next line is like, "I'm to put father against son," and yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
He's here to divide everything up. It's not a family. It's not a family religion. This is a drop out of society religion, and join a cult and castrate yourself and wait till the end of the world comes. That's what early Christianity was. And then someone might say, but then Paul fixed all this. What, really? Here's what Paul says. Paul says this in 1 Corinthians 7. He says, "To the unmarried and the widows, I say, it is good for them to stay unmarried, as I do. But if they cannot control themselves, they should marry, for it is better to marry." He says, first and foremost, don't even get married. What? I thought Christianity was all about marriage and family, not early Christianity. Early Christianity says drop out of society, don't get married, follow your bishop, and just do what they say. That's early Christianity.
And was that the reason for the Catholic priests not getting married?
That's what they say. They say because Paul, yeah.
But they used to get married. They stopped getting
Yeah.
married like only.
They have weird theological reasons for that, but like
They stopped to get married like they used to get married well into like the nearly the thousands, I think.
yeah, or some point in the medieval period they switched it. I have no idea when they switched that, but you're right. There was never a regulation that they can't get married, but like they debated over this for a long time. The point I'm making though is what we view Christianity as is this like family oriented thing where you raise the children in the church. That's not how the early Christians saw it. The earliest first 2 centuries of Christianity was wild. They're waiting for the end of the world any day now, and drop out of society and get in the desert, follow the other ones that already came before you. That was their mentality for a long time. And then it took someone like Constantine to come along and go, well, that's not going to work for my empire. We need to make this more family oriented, more dogmatic, more corporatized.
Yeah.
He took Christianity in its raw form and they corporatized it. And now you have a chain. Now every Orthodox church you go in, whether you're in Greece or you're in Turkey or you're in Italy, they all look the same.
They have their own logos.
They have their logos. They have their
Starbucks.
it's the first corporation.
Yeah, just like Coca-Cola over here.
Yep.
Is this a BTR sponsor? Is it not a BTR sponsor? I will never tell. What I would tell though is that if you want to support the show, patreon.com/breaktherules, become a patron today, and I guarantee you guys, you are going to have a wonderful time because we bring all the best minds together. Neal, Gnostic Informant, we have Steph, Uberboyo over here, we have this incredible audience. Guys, thank you guys so much. Give yourselves a round of applause. Thank you guys so much for being here. Now, before we go, I want to do like the final Q&As here, but before I forget, very important, Islam. We did not talk about the elephant in the room. What exactly do you guys think is going to be happening with the with the Muslim brothers, with the Ummah, as it were, the House of Islam, current residents of the UK? So I
You
don't
would know more about that than I would.
The Muslims.
Yeah.
The rumors are that Muslims are gaining more and more traction in the UK. Is that true?
They have a lot of traction in France. France is a very closed society. So like they have this whole world that they exist in. There's a guy called Houellebecq, and he's like kind of a visionary author. He like pulls stuff deep out of his dreams, and he wrote a book called Submission, which is basically about the idea of like a Muslim political force taking over France. And yeah, it's just there's also this phenomenon called Islamo-leftism, where there'll be this alliance between like Islam and hard leftism.
Like Frogan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very ironic because you have like
Hassan Piker. He's a Muslim, right?
Yeah.
And he's on the left
yeah.
one.
okay, yeah.
Yeah.
And which is obviously ironic because like Islam is like a
It's the
hard
exact
right.
opposite, right?
It's in some sense, if we're talking about ideology and religion, we're talking about like, and this is actually a marked difference between Christianity and Islam that I find quite fascinating. Christianity has a very Gnostic core, which leads to it being very profoundly deep in what it does to your soul, which is what I think Jung noticed, is that it had this profound deepening effect on the European soul. And Catholicism comes in and enforces this like, hard right, posterior medial frontal cortex, love your family, love your God, love your empire, chud out religion. That's what they build with this because they need to enforce rituals of life. Whereas Islam seems that it's just impulsively a ideological war religion from the start. There's no self-introspection. There's no problems where it's like, oh, Gnostic conscience, any stuff like that. They're like, this is about fighting and this is about Islam and it's like ideological religion in its purity, this type of thing, which makes it incredibly powerful, which is probably why the likes of the Nazis were like, what a base religion. We should definitely fucking, it'd be so cool if we like use this instead of Christianity.
Well, it's the only one that you aren't allowed to make fun of lest they chop your head off.
Yeah, because it gives you, like, it's like very instinctively hardcore. They have a clear conscience about fighting for their tribe, which is the Arab tribe in the Muslim religion. And it's like God and nationalism and tribalism blended together. Yeah. And you'll say, like, they're so cognitive dissonance and closed-minded. And they're like, yeah, we are. Like, we're just here to win.
But they also had the same mentality that the Christians brought, which is that slaves can become free and
maybe I'm
rise up.
Yeah.
They also have that mentality, like the freeing mentality.
So maybe to complete my point, you ask about like the experience of Islam in the modern world, and I think they still hold on to this ideological hardcoreness. And you look at the Europeans and they're in the like opposite thing. They're like the Gnostic liberals. They're very open to everything. And then you have this penetrating, closed, cognitively dissonant, forceful entity that's like very naturally impulsive. And it just like steamrolls through this because it's not going to participate in the Gnostic self-doubt. Yeah. And that's actually a really big problem with the Europeans. And this is also like a criticism of people like Jordan Peterson, is that he's constantly, because he's read Jung and Wotan and because of the Nazi myth, he's constantly like, nationalism is the worst thing ever and the Europeans will chimp out. And so it's almost like he's suppressing that instinct in the Europeans, forcing them to remain in this vague liberal Gnostic perspective. And maybe that's a valuable thing we must hold on to, but what happens if it's like maladaptive towards nature?
I don't even think, back to Murray for a second, I don't even think Douglas Murray would agree with Peterson there, because at a certain point you have to understand that you do need to have force, you do need to have the wolf in order to defeat the bigger wolf, which is Fenrir. You need to wolfenize your troops, so to speak.
So would you take Kanye West to defeat Islam, Lev?
Would I take Kanye West to defeat Islam? I think that there is an aspect of Kanye West that can be extracted. And I think certain people, by the way, like Mike David of Red Bar, are very successful at doing that. Mike David is also the guy who announced, and this is official, that it is officially, because of Kanye West's album Cousins, it is officially, everybody, incest summer. Okay, we are currently in incest summer right now. And it means that a lot of these things that are going on inside of us are going to start to come out and interact with the world. Because really, the incest that I think is going to be happening now is not even the incest of cousins. It's the incest of all of these different connected ideas that are now coming to the fore thanks to the memetics of this interconnected society. So that is the kind of incest that I think we are going to be seeing right now. And I think BTR and all of us here are playing our role in order for all of these ideas to intersect with each other and to create who knows what, because it could just be like this ugly, malformed Frankenstein incest baby, or it can be something very beautiful. All right, so anybody got any questions?
So this multicultural world that you're talking about, Neal, where cultures are kind of segregated from one another, which is also similar to the nationalistic tendency. This is, I don't think, going to happen in a world where we have the level of technology that we have.
Right,
because,
it's a big problem.
Because technology has a universalizing quality to it. Yeah. And the kind of algorithm brainwashing that you're talking about that leads into atheism and the rise of atheism going back multiple centuries may have to do with not just algorithms, but access to information in general. And people consuming popular media is another form of algorithmizing, where people, that's been going on for a long time, going back to, religious scriptures, brainwashing people. It's information in writing, right? Which is a form of technology. Just as these kinds of things have the ability to brainwash someone or mechanize an individual, they also have the ability to allow someone to process that information and develop their own ways of thinking. And so I think that what's coming from these reactions against the boundary dissolving aspect of technology is it's a reaction that could potentially prevent the end of the world, which is this boundary dissolving aspect of the trajectory of technology. But if we are going to continue on that trajectory and not revert into, because it is a reversion if we're talking about like technological progress, which is like the aspect of change that is embodied in nature, not the aspect of nature that you keep referring to as like the natural order of things. It's the aspect of nature that is evolutionary. And if we're going to navigate that to the point that it ends up ending our world, so to say, many people are not going to be able to pass through that Frashgard, right? The people that will be able to are those that are able to utilize the technology and the mechanization of it for their own aims. How do we create a organization or collective aim towards that for people to pass through this time and not like get sucked into the entropy that happens through splintering of lots of different ways of TikTok religiosity,
That's interesting. I want to say one thing about the whole idea of like technology preventing people from sort of like adopting local custom or like, carrying on local customs that they can be like identified as that particular region. You can also use the internet to do exactly that. So you, for example, like what's going on in Ireland right now, you see a lot of protests, counter-protests over immigration. But that's also signaling out to the world what the Irish people believe in and what they're standing on. People understand that from going on their phones, or else I wouldn't know that. I wouldn't know about Ireland if I didn't hop on my Twitter and see, oh, look, those people are pissed. So you can sort of use the internet in both ways. The internet can be a globalization tool, and it could totally debase all culture into one big slop of culture, or the internet can be used as a megaphone for people in these cultures to sort of stand on their principles and say, no, this is who we are as people. This is who we are as the city of New Orleans. This is who we are as the city of whatever. So I think it can be a double-edged sword.
I think I've like to build on that. I think I have an answer to that. Because what was Neal saying earlier? He's saying like, all right, you in ancient Rome, you would go around ancient Rome. They'd have the Greco interpretation. They'd have the interpretation. It was like comparative religion. Yeah. And they'd be like, oh, those Germans are worshipping Mercury. That's what they noticed with the Gauls, the French are worshipping this painting.
Yeah, they saw the wings on his head and they thought, that's Mercury.
Yeah, so they understand that like these native cultures can exist and they'll let them exist. But there's an overarching forceful culture, which is Rome. They're like, we set the standard for generalized culture. We're the corporation, if you will. The internet could actually facilitate that. You're saying like universal phenomenon within technology is, you're actually extremely correct. Technology has this inherent like mimetic instinct to universalize things towards like being libertarian. It actually is kind of like built that way. It's weird. Technology has this Promethean soul that does just make this. It's almost like a Gnostic phenomenon. It's very strange. So it can be universalize. So maybe what we could look at on the internet is that the formation of like a Hellenic culture, like a generalized overculture that is maybe just positive,
or even a group, certain groups of different philosophical sects that all have a lot of things in common and a little tweaks, little differences here and there. But you have like when Nietzsche writes about in the Tragic Age of the Greeks. Yeah. How you have, there's Heraclitus here, there's Parmenides here, there's Plato over here, there's Socrates over there, and there's different, they're different sages with representing different philosophies, all on the stage together. Yeah. That could be the other way.
Like that, and that's a really interesting way to think, because that's way more sophisticated. If you look at like the simplest brains, they generate like very straight linear pathways. If you look at our brains, there are these enormous celestial constellations of all these different firing electrical pathways. And when you think, what happens is essentially like 10 ideas switch on at the back of your brain and they flow forward like this army. And then your mind starts to knock off the stupid ones till like maybe 2 or 3 get presented to you to think. And then you choose which one you want to do. So it's almost like a diversity of opinions is actually existing within your brain, and you're always getting pulled in opposite directions. And that's a sort of like aspect of higher order thinking. And so to add an addition on top of this about like what this culture might look like, I actually like to shill Jung at this point, because I think Jung does a very, very good job of understanding a big history perspective a lot of people miss out on. In Ion, Jung basically, he's like studying the Christian movement and saying what actually happened here. And he lies very heavy on the idea that Christianity is Gnostic, and it's generating a focus on the human soul. So this is like the ultimate leftist libtard perspective, where it's like, if you shear all boundaries and you just have this open-minded soul of yours, which makes you eject from your family that you can spend time with, what is that? And of course, Christ says stuff like, you can sin against me, Jesus, just don't sin against the Holy Spirit. It's like the conscience that interfaces with the Holy Spirit is the most important thing. My name's Steph. Saint Stephen is the first guy to get martyred after Jesus. He gets martyred because he stands up to the Pharisees and says, fuck all you guys, you're all liars, you killed Jesus. And he was nervous, but then he let the Holy Spirit inside of him, like a imagination, his conscience, to speak through him. And it allowed him to like own those motherfuckers and crush them. So Jung is pointing out that what Christianity is a movement of the Holy Spirit. And what we saw happen is the Holy Spirit arrives in the world. The Christians all gather around Jesus and they're like, what is going on here? They have this massive Gnostic 300, 400 years. Then the church comes in and creates the institution of the Holy Spirit. That exists for another couple of thousand, like 1,000 years, another couple of centuries. And then that begins to fragment. You start to see monasteries show up, which is, again, the people individuating, splitting off, developing like this relationship. This is, Jung points this out. It's like, this is all unconsciously unfolding, where you're seeing the people, the Christians, purify their relationship with the Holy Spirit. They begin to form monasteries. That begins to bend into early Protestantism, which begins to go against this closed-minded church and begin to create diversity of opinion. I believe you're from a Protestant denomination. So it's like when all you guys came over to America, you were all following like Mormonism or this version of Protestantism. It was like the Holy Spirit, the conscience was now firing on all cylinders. And what has happened in the last 500 years is not the suppressing of this or it's the extension of this. What I'm pointing out with this atheist trend and this bursting now into, it seems like, a general religiosity, is a further intensity and enhancing of this sort of like ideological free conscience. This seems to be the defining feature of our culture, if you so will. And so what we have as a problem is that this is what we are. This is what we understand ourselves as. there's no way we're going to get ideological. It's like, I just don't see how it's possible. Some chud yay fucking dresses up all of us up in Hugo Boss and just says, this is everybody's going to think like this. That's just not going to happen in the West, it seems, unless there's like really big political changes.
Or unless people get the Neuralink.
So that's a good point. But to put aside that complexity for the moment, it seems like what's happening is we're going deeper into our conscience. We're forming a deeper, more intimate relationship with our conscience. What started off with God and Jesus, moved into the church, has now moved into literally our own souls. And that's what we need to interface with. And so Jung would be saying, like, psychology, like the next step is a personal, individuated psychological relationship with your own conscience. That's the thing of the future, psychology of the future.
And going back to Zoroastrianism, that would be the Farvahar. That would be the guardian angel at the end of time, going from the future and contacting you. And so when you are speaking in this Holy Spirit type of way, you are in a way speaking through your future self, who is trying to get you closer to that level.
Yeah, go on.
I was just going to say, and you brought up an interesting point about there being all these different cultures in different regions, but also there's like a unifying force, which would be the Romans in this case. But who would fill that role today? That's where the rule of the best would have to come in. It would be some sort of aristocratic, spread out group of people, and that's where the internet would be kind of vital. There would be some sort of unifying force of who can take it and who can handle that beast. You know what I mean?
Credit to someone like Douglas Murray. That's probably why it's important to enforce standards and be like, look, if we're going to do this and we're going to have this ability to speak free, you constantly see the media, the mainstream media is trying to grab podcasters now and be like, you have to talk a certain way, and it's like, all right, listen, fuck off. You're not allowed to part in our scene. But we also have to be responsible as free speakers, if you so will, to actually have very high standards and keep that up. Because for the last 10 years, 20 years, there actually has been a lot of capacity for you to go along to the people of the best information, and they can rock it up in their success. Like, you just do really coherent, deep research into these topics, and you get rewarded as a consequence. And that's just a case study for how this stuff could work.
Right.
So there's also a deep faith. People aren't stupid. If you just believe that people's conscience is not, people can get brainwashed, people can fall into cults, people can fall into algorithm retardedness. But in the general broad sense, I'm very white-pilled by seeing how sophisticated an awful lot of people are, they naturally, you meet dudes driving forklifts, listening to Joe Rogan and stuff like this, to an astrophysicist and stuff like this.
Some 4chaners know more about Judaism than actual Jews. Yeah. No, seriously. Where the point is, it's not that they're stupid. I think the problem is that we have too many people who are cowardly. Meaning that you could be somebody who is smart, but then if you're afraid of pushing the boundaries of your own circle, that's where you start getting into trouble. Because even subconsciously, it's not like you're saying to yourself, oh, I'm going to be a pussy and not, think a different way about this thing so that, I get people on my side. I think it more happens in the back of your head. And the problem here is, how do you solve it? I think you hit the nail on the head. You strike the balance between the Douglas Murrays as well as people who are more in this wolf mode like Kanye is heralding over here. You bring them together, and that is why I bring together the people on Break the Rules. This is why we do this. I have a compound which is far away from here. It's not exactly a forest, but it's in a very nice area. And I invite all of the people who are going to deem themselves worthy into the compound, into the think tank, and we are going to make a lot of magic happen. And I really appreciate you guys being here for the show. This is the end. We have to go right now. There is an after party that is awaiting us. But guys, thank you so much. Uberboyo, you are an incredible storyteller, thinker. You are a guide to the future. But you would not be complete without somebody who is able to take the greatest works of the past, bring them out into the open, and connect them to what's going on in the future, which is the sage over here, Gnostic Informant, Neal. You are so amazing. Guys, thank you guys so much
and a good
for
host,
being here.
And a good host to bring us together.
Good times.
And thank you to Pikachu over here, the MVP. So Guys, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the show, make sure you smash the subscribe. No, I'll be gentle.
Jesus,
Smash the subscribe
calm
button.
down there.
Smash. Like you remember that guy, the homeless
But the
hitchhiker?
axe guy.
Yeah. Kai, the homeless hitchhiker. I even talked to him on the phone one time. Oh, here's Charmander with the Promethean fire
Yeah,
over
there you
here.
go.
Nice.
Over here on this tail.
Chudmander.
Yeah, Chudmander, exactly. So guys, if you would,
Pikachu.
if Pikachu, exactly. If you guys enjoyed the show, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, click the bell. The bell is very important. And be sure to go to patreon.com/breaktherules. Become a patron today, and you will not regret it. You are going to get these shows before they come out to the general populace. If you become a $20 patron, you are going to join these fine people over here in the BTR get-togethers, streams that we have over here live in the BTR studio in New York City, as well as other stuff going on in the future. So guys, thank you so much for watching. Please follow these two wonderful gentlemen, subscribe, and I will see you guys later. Take care. Bye-bye.